What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Luke here with our Monday Night Football live stream. Going to talk about the injury report, who we expect to be inactive, talk about the weather because it is an outdoor game there at Lumen Stadium, and then hop into the player poll and all of your questions. So let's go ahead, bring up ESPN. I'll share my screen and we'll talk through the one or two injury situations that we have on the slate. Where first off, KJ Hamler, he was a game time decision, but earlier on today, it was reported from him himself that he will be suiting it up for tonight. So as of right now, we are expecting him to be active and all systems go. Now, as for a snap count, we aren't entirely sure about that. So maybe over the next half an hour to an hour while we're live here, we'll get a report from the beat reporter that gives us a little bit more detail there. But as is, we know that he's playing. On the other side of the ball, Kenneth Walker III, which if he's healthy in full status, I would assume is maybe the number 2 or at the very least number 3 running back here for Seattle, is also a game time decision. And Pete Carroll is infamously close to the chest when it comes to his injuries. So I don't think we're going to get all that much knowledge there until the inactives and active list comes out. But even if he plays, he's a backup running back. And personally, I'm hoping that he's inactive so that guys like a Travis Homer or more importantly, DJ Dallas, that's even cheaper, can get some run tonight and at a near minimum price could be a pretty solid source of value. So those are the two major injury situations. Randy Gregory, I know for a fact, will be playing for the Broncos tonight. And outside of that, it's a lot of backups, third string corners, that sort of thing. Not people that we really have to worry about. The weather is perfect. So because it is up there in Seattle, we do have to take a look at it. But here right around game time, which will be at 5:15 local time, it's 73 degrees, wide open, pretty much a 0% chance of rain. You can see 2%, which is pretty damn close to it. Later on in the evening, it doesn't get too much cooler. If we look at the winds, it's like 7 to 14 miles an hour, which for golf would be significant, but here with football, that's nothing. Should be perfect playing conditions. So let's go over to the player poll now. I'll go ahead and bring up that tab. Also, I see Rob is down there in chat. What's going on, Rob? Let me bring up the projections, close this out of here. And Rob has a question about a game script, which I love because that's one of the first things we're going to talk about here. He asks, are you throwing in a Seattle winning / low scoring game script into your builds? I see yourself getting to a ton of Captain Penny, which, puke. I would agree with you there. I am going to have those game scripts. So let's just talk about it in general. The chalk tonight in 87% of bets, 89% of people on the money line. So 87% of people betting the spread are taking Seattle. And that's with a -6 spread. Now, it was at 3.5 about a month ago. That's obviously been slammed into oblivion here at this point. Now it's there at 6 points. And that's what everyone's going to play in DFS. It's Russell Wilson's quote-unquote revenge game. But you could say the same thing for Noah Fant on the other side there for Seattle now. And you're going to see a lot of the ownership in DFS reflect all of that momentum, right? People, especially early into the season when the casuals are playing NFL DFS, they're going to go out there and back their man. And tonight, Russell Wilson is going to be your highest owned player, whether he deserves to or not. He's $11,800. And like you mentioned, there's plenty of possibilities, like a lower scoring game, where Seattle could stay in the mix. And a lot of their lower priced players, because in general, the Broncos players are more expensive than the Seattle players here. A lot of those lower tier values on the other side might end up in the optimal. So I definitely agree with you there. One thing I'll say is the Steelers played the Seattle Seahawks last year. And the year before that. But last year, they played it without Russell Wilson. They had Geno Smith as their quarterback. And I thought it was going to be an absolute cupcake, and it couldn't have been further from the truth. While the Steelers won that game, they had to work their butt off for it, won it there in the last 5 minutes. And it wasn't like they were going out there and having explosive plays. Like Robert said, Pete Carroll would love nothing more than to give Penny the ball all game long. They just pounded it down our throat. Now, our defense was infamously bad against the run. It's a lot better this year. They're in the Broncos, they're known for their secondary. Now, their rushing defense is pretty up there too. It's not the best, but it's up there in the top 5 to top 10. Maybe Pete Carroll can get something cooking there with the rushing offense, make this a lower scoring game where a lot of the clock is getting ground out because of all the rushing attempts on either side. And rather than $11,800 Russell Wilson getting there, it's a lot of those mid-tier running backs that you need in your lineups, perhaps defenses or kickers, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. I tend to agree, Robert. So yes, I'm playing scripts like that. I'm not playing any Seattle onslaught, so I'm not taking any like 4-2 or 5-1 Seattle lineups, but I'm going to have a lot of 3-3s. It's going to be a lot of 4-2s with two premium players from Seattle. I'm giving them a lot more credit in this matchup than a lot of other people out there. And I think if you're going to play Denver, if you're going to go with that stack, which I will also be playing some 4-2 and 5-1 Denver stacks, I'm going to be doing so in a really creative fashion. Like I'm going to try and differentiate myself as much as humanly possible. Maybe my number one wide receiver might be an Albert O, assuming that he maybe vultures all the touchdowns, gets 2 touchdowns, like 70 yards, something like that. I'm not going to be going out there taking Cortland Sutton, matching him up with Russell Wilson and captain or vice versa there, because it's just going to become, okay, let's duplicate ourselves with 30-40% of the field. 89% of the money line bets are on Seattle for tonight. So we have our projections up. I want to talk through just some of the players here first. And then afterwards, we're going to go into more detail about the types of players that be stacking together under certain game scripts, because really, we're just going to be talking about like if the situation happens, what sort of players am I getting to? That's the more important part about Showdown. I'm playing 55 lineups tonight, and I'll be building all of them by hand this time. So I'm going to set myself, as soon as we're done here on the live stream, get into making my own lineups because it's going to take me quite some time. The reason why I want to hand build them all this time, it's a little bit of an experiment. I want to make sure I'm correlating every single one to the max, right? Making sure that every player has been well thought through, because one thing I've noticed with some of my Showdown lineups of late, when I'm doing them on an optimizer, is I'll get like 80-90% of them optimal, and then I'll have a handful of lineups when I'm going through it, especially after lock, where I'm just like, wow, that lineup could have been a little bit better. So on and so forth, right? Just self-reflection, looking at them. My results have been pretty decent so far this year, but anytime I'm going through my Draftkings, right, and I click on a lineup and I'm just like, wow, like why would I pair these two guys together? There's negative correlation, so on and so forth in that game script. It's something that I just got to learn from, right? So I'm going to do them all by hand this time. It's going to take me longer. I'm only playing 55 as opposed to 100, so I'm playing a higher dollar contest to compensate for that, and that's what we're rolling with. So some of the players I like, Russell Wilson at the top. I mean, you can't avoid him, but I will not have him in the captain slot. He's first off too expensive. I don't think it's going to be some blowout or shootout, I should say. Is probably the better word for it. Might be a blowout in either direction, but I don't think it's going to be a shootout. And for somebody at 11,800 to hit, I mean, you need him to score at least 25 fantasy points, probably closer to 30. I'm not sure if he has that in him. So I'm going to have him at flex. I have him 50% owned in what I call the slapdick contests, which, by the way, if you've been here for a while, you probably know what I'm talking about, are just casual level contests like the Millie Maker, 100,000, 200,000 plus entry GPPs, that sort of thing, where a lot of the just general public plays them, enter, 4 or 5 lineups into the large Millie Maker, that sort of thing, and that'll be their weekend exposure. They're just going to play Russell Wilson in every lineup, like literally every single lineup. So don't be surprised that in the slapdick sort of contests, that Russell Wilson's even higher owned. Like rather than just being a conglomerate closer to like just under 70%, probably going to be closer to like 80 in those sort of contests. Javonte Williams at 10,200. Thing I have to say about him is I like him in the fact that he gets you slightly more unique off of Russell Wilson. When you stack Russell, you're ideally going to be looking to one of these wide receivers, either a Cortland Sutton or a Jerry Judy. I would argue that 90, I'd say at least 80, if not closer to 90% of people that are stacking Russell Wilson there are going to take a Sutton or a Jerry Judy, right? And then probably fill in with a KJ Hamler, who we expect to play, right? We're going to get information on that pretty much any minute now. We're expecting it. But he's $4,400. He opens up quite a bit of flexibility. So just know tonight, if you're starting with Wilson, then going to Sutton or Jerry Judy, probably Judy because he's a little bit cheaper, and then taking somebody like a KJ Hamler down there, you're going to duplicate yourself with just an outrageous amount of people. Like 25% of the field is probably going to start their lineup with those 3 players. Now you have 3 more spots to differentiate yourself, but why not just, maybe you can still take Russell Wilson if you want, right? But maybe in this lineup, I'm not going to. Start with Javonte Williams. Maybe you take your favorite wide receiver of the bunch, right? You get to his son. Maybe you get to somebody like a cheaper KJ Hamler, right? Because he needs to get to like 13, 14 fantasy points to get there, to get into the optimal lineup. So you mix him in there with the Javonte Williams. then run some of these cheaper than they should be Seahawks players. I mean, the most expensive Seahawks player, right, is Geno Smith at $8,600. He's more than nearly $4,000 less expensive than somebody like Russell Wilson. I love somebody like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett at $7,000. I think they're both cheaper than they should be. I mean, last year Lockett was like $9,000 every game, even with Geno Smith at quarterback sometimes. DK Metcalf $8,400. I mean, he can catch a touchdown, get there. I really like the Seattle side from the pricing perspective. And because of the narrative, all the money's coming in on the Broncos. I've heard everyone say it's just like, Russell Wilson revenge game. And tonight, by the way, when he throws 4 touchdowns, you're going to probably see me even say, be like, oh, wow, look at Russell Wilson. We all knew this was going to happen. Sure, that's the most likely thing. But if we're playing this game theory, perspective, we're trying to take down large field GPPs. I don't think that's the way to go, because these guys are more than capable of getting to ceilings because they're way cheaper than they should be. Again, they played the Steelers last year, and I just can't get it on my head. They had Geno Smith at quarterback. They still put up a pretty damn good fight. It was a lot of little dump-off passes. I mean, guys like Tyler Lockett were getting a ton of run. Their running backs were averaging like 5-6 yards of rush. I don't think they're helpless. I mean, I thought the Atlanta Falcons were going to be helpless there on Sunday, and I'll take one there. Like, I was completely wrong about that. Clearly, I mean, they were way more competitive than I thought they were going to be. Why not Seattle, right? And again, if it's going to take a lot less points for their sort of players to get there, just because of the pricing. And I don't think you have to full on stack it. In fact, I kind of like Geno Smith there. I obviously have Russell Wilson in the player pool. But getting to lineups that don't have any quarterbacks in them, I think makes sense on the slate, particularly because I like Javonte Williams. I like Rashad Penny, obviously, if he's going to get a lot of that run that we saw like he did last year against the Steelers. A lot of these mid-tier wide receivers you can jam into lineups. These are the sort of builds that I'm trying to get to that I think just avoiding Russell Wilson yourself, I mean, that can make your lineup unique. Like it's like 70-80% out, right? You're going to be dealing with like 20% of the pool at that point. Let's say that you set a role to not spend all of your salary. I mean, that might be enough to go out there and you can feel like you'd have a good chance of being unique, right? If you have that little cap on salary there with almost every single lineup. That might be what I do. I might just not play Russell Wilson. So we're going to have to see about it. There's a lot of opportunity cost because he projects well off the board, right? 19.8 points. That is head and shoulders better than everyone else in this field. But even if he scores 22 fantasy points, let's assume he has a pretty damn good game, right? Has at least like one standard deviation above average type of performance. That might not be on the optimal. If you have a lot of these guys here that score like 15 fantasy points, and by avoiding Russell Wilson, we're able to take like 4 or 5 of them together. I mean, that might be the way to the optimal lineup, particularly when there's not that many super cheap guys to get to. Like, we're going to talk about DJ Dallas, right? He's a Seattle player, by the way, who's only $400. He's like the only real punt. I mean, there's like one other guy there that's in black that I'm not going to talk about. That's going to be on the Patreon, by the way, that you can get to. But outside of those two guys, and like they're true punts, like we don't even know how much DJ Dallas is going to play. It could be like 5 snaps. It could be less than that for all we know. The other one, it could play 0 snaps for all I know at that point. I'd rather be living in, let's say, this mid-tier range of these kickers. We're going to talk about the kickers later. I think they're great options on the slate because I think that first off, Russell Wilson might struggle. He's a brand new offense, brand new team around him. I've bet on that in week 1. I bet a lot of unders on the games, and they hit pretty much in mass across the NFL. And it's just due to the chaos of week 1. A lot of these guys didn't play in preseason. Russell Wilson didn't get that much time in the preseason. A lot of his timing down. Guys like KJ Hamler were injured, right? He didn't have much practice time until this point. They may stall out in the red zone, just like Tom Brady, who, obviously he took time off too, right? He was going to be a little bit more rusty than usual. He showed it last night in the red zone. And the opposite side of things, the Cowboys were a dumpster fire. They couldn't do a thing for their life, right? And you're talking about 2 offenses that are definitely inferior to those 2 teams that if they struggled on offense, they sure as shit can, right? And if that's going to happen, these kickers might be worth a few looks too. Now, am I going to play him at captain? Hell no, that's not going to happen. But in the flex spot, it's one of the few times. You're not going to hear this very often from me this year. I can tell you that. I'm not a fan of playing kickers, and it screwed me last night on Sunday Night Football. It's like the one reason I didn't win a ton of money last night. I'm going to be playing the kickers tonight. And it's not just because they were, you had the 4 field goal performance last night. It's because this should be a grinded out, pretty solid defense type of game. And I think they could look a little bit rusty. And outside of Russell Wilson, we talked about some of the Denver players I like Javonte Williams. I think he's a great way to get different up top. I mean, he's probably more expensive than he should be because I still think he is going to, share carries with Melvin Gordon. I've heard a lot of people talk about that, but even with that sort of game script last year, I mean, there were plenty of games where both were active, where Williams still went for like 20 fantasy points. Because he's averaging like 5 yards a rush, their O-line is excellent on the ground. Because he was taking up a lot of the touchdown production, I mean, he's the clear goal line back. I mean, you're going to have Gordon vulture touchdown from time to time. The thing is, at $7,400, I just think that Williams has, even though he's $3,000 more expensive, like 5-6 times the chance to get to the optimal lineup. And even if Gordon's going to be like, I don't know, like 15% owned and Williams is going to be super chalky, I'd rather take him at the super chalk level because I think it's actually worth the chalk. So I think he's legitimately like 5 or 6 times more likely to get to like a 20-point performance. So that's what I'm thinking with Javonte. And yeah, for Gordon to get to 20 fantasy points, at least per the snap shares I'm giving him, right? The rushing load that I'm allocating towards Melvin Gordon in my projections, it's going to take him 2 touchdowns, like 4 or 5 catches to get to that ceiling performance. And that's not going to happen very often for Melvin Gordon. We talked about Geno. DK Metcalf, I like quite a bit too. Same thing with Rashad Penny for the Seattle side. I think if you're going with like a 3-3 stack, these are players that I'm trying to prioritize in that sort of scenario. Even as buybacks, if you still really like Russell, which by the way, guys, I get it. If you really think Russell Wilson's going to kill it tonight, play him, right? Definitely make him a focal point of your player pool, right? But get different, right? If you're going to take him, instead of buying back with, let's say, Geno Smith and DK Metcalf that everyone's going to think about, right? Maybe get a little bit more different about it. Go, okay, well, I'm going to buy back with somebody on Seattle that nobody is playing, right? So I'm going to go down here to the bottom and go, okay, let's take either, a Travis Homer, DJ Dallas, for example, at $400, or we'll talk about, and try and go that direction. So just, like I said, you can still play Russell Wilson. Just do it responsibly. Don't be entering super chalky lineups that are going to be duplicated like 100 to 200 times. Even when you win, you're going to be pretty pissed off about it. I like Rashad Penny. We talked about it. Jerry Judy, Cortland Sutton. I don't want to completely write them off because I will be playing them tonight. It's just that I don't love their ownership. They're going to be fairly owned. They're also fairly priced. So there really isn't that much to say about them. They're where they should be, both from the ownership and the price standpoint. It's just when you're allocating that money, to get leverage, right? You're going to have to play them at least like half of your lineups in both scenarios, if not more, in one of the 2 scenarios to get proper leverage. It's a decision you have to make, right? Because there's a lot of other players you can take here. I mean, like I said, Geno, I like DK Metcalf. I like Rashad Penny. I don't like Melvin Gordon. Like that's the one guy I definitely will not be playing. But there's decisions to be made here. Guys that you're going to have to play and guys that you're going to have to fade. If I fade Russell Wilson, like that's almost a whole slot opened up where I can play other people. Maybe I can fit in all 4 of these guys here, right? From like a, Javonte Williams down to a DK Metcalf. Maybe I'm going to have to pick like a Jerry Judy or a Rashad Penny to add to my player pool. That's at least where I see myself living, right? I haven't gotten into actually making my lineups yet. Like I said, after we get off here, I'm going to be doing so, talking on the Discord too, giving you guys live updates with that. But yeah, we're going to have to see. I'm liking that build a little bit more. It's going to be lower owned. Like I said, $11,800 is a steep price tag to pay for Russell Wilson as well. And I'm not sure if it's going to be optimal. Let's see what's going on. Big text down there says, what's up, dude? Finally got the NFL upgrade. Feels like you've been missing out. You have been, right? It's football season, but we're glad to have you now. And Robert says, maybe we can get unique by having Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon in the same lineup. You absolutely can. Last year, I took down a GPP and Showdown by having Leonard Fournette and Giovanni Bernard in the same lineup. So yesterday I played some Giovanni Bernard, just, remembering good times there. He didn't even see the field last night, so it is what it is. But I still played him in a few lineups just in case because crazy shit happens, right? And I played that lineup by mistake, actually. I usually set a role not to play running backs on the same team together. But if you want to get unique real quickly, take both these running backs. No one's going to take a $8,000 something, well, actually $10,000 running back from one team and then a $7,000 from that same team. You're going to be, I don't want to say unique immediately, but you're going to be a subset of probably 0.5 to 1% of the entire player pool that has that 2-player combination. And it's a lot of times going to be, I don't want to say players that aren't sharp, But most of the time, it's going to be people that do it by accident, right? Like I have from time to time. Like when I won that GPP, that lineup was unintentionally entered, right? Sometimes that pays off in tournaments. And if you do it on purpose, by the way, I mean, you could take Russell Wilson for all you want. I mean, you could take all of these chalky plays if you want. Albert O is going to be chalky because he's only $5,000. I mean, he's going to get plenty of attention. I think DJ Dallas, I mean, what do I have at 11% ownership? That's really high for somebody at $400. He's going to get some attention. You can play all the chalky guys if you want to. So, yeah, there's a time and place for it. They could be rush heavy too, right? Because in that game script, you're just assuming that they're going to pound the rock, right? All the touchdowns are going to go through the rushing game. That can pay off. I mean, Javonte Williams, right, can get one touchdown, put up more than enough production with the yards and catches to get there. Melvin Gordon could score a touchdown. Maybe he gets a few catches and like 50 yards rushing. I mean, both of those would be in the optimal lineup, right? So it's not that far-fetched. It's just Russell Wilson has to put up a dud then. So if you're going to play those two together, you probably don't want to play Russell Wilson then. So yeah, I think you're onto something there. Colin says, Skull, fellas, watch out for them Vikings. Yeah, I think you're onto something there. I thought they could be a solid team, right? I mentioned the whole O'Connell thing when we did that live stream. I was like, hey, that O'Connell, he's looking like a killer. At least there's a lot of hype behind him. It looks like the hype was real because first off, I mean, Justin Jefferson going off, we expect that. It was just how consistent they moved the chains. I mean, I watched a lot of that game. It never felt like they were behind schedule. And on every third down, they hit receivers that were wide open. It wasn't like they were forcing things. There were no miraculous plays in that game. I mean, even the Justin Jefferson touchdowns, right? It was like yards after catch that got him into the end zone. And I don't want to say he had like wide open lanes to it, but he was like crossing routes where he had all his guys blocking for him, made a few guys miss and scored. I mean, that's money. That's scheme right there. That's outthinking your opponent, playing chess when the other one's playing checkers. Yeah, dude, I think you guys are onto something there, Colin. Your coordinator there knows. I shouldn't call coordinator. Your coach, your head coach knows what the heck he's talking about. Adam says, thoughts on Penny captain with Seattle defense or Myers run back. So in that kind of game script, right, I do like that because like I mentioned, like they were effective against the Steelers when they played us last year with Geno at quarterback, and it was all the rushing game. I don't mind taking him there, and then as a buyback, like I don't mind playing the passing offense from Denver still, right? So I know you were talking about more of like a lower scoring game. So, taking defense, a Myers, a buyback on that same type of team from the same team. Maybe you take somebody like him at captain, right? And then Tyler Lockett. Like I don't hate the idea of still mixing in one of the pass catchers from that team. If you go a little bit cheaper, I mean, you mentioned Myers. I like him. I like McManus from the other side too. So you could run it back with. I don't want to use both kickers together. That feels like a little bit of a outside outcome, like something that's just probably not going to happen. So I probably won't be doing that myself. But I think you're onto something there. But you don't have to avoid the wide receivers. And I know you didn't say that you had to, right? I'm just assuming that's probably why you chose some of those people. You might still want to consider guys like Tyler Lockett. I think that because he's a little bit PPR dependent, he could still get there. Nick says, took the Vikings to win the division before the year. That looks pretty decent so far. Eddie says, any update on Hamler? Not that I know of as of right now. So if anybody gets that news, go ahead and let me know. I can't really surf Twitter here on the stream, but as I last know of, he's supposed to play. He's supposed to go out there and play, but we haven't gotten actual confirmation. Nick says, how is Jefferson always wide open? It's because of his route running. So people always forget about that. Like people think it's like, oh, that guy's just wide open because he's fast. It's because of change of direction. So when somebody's really agile, has a lot, can change direction, run routes really well. Antonio Brown was that sort of guy. Wes Welker had a really good change of speed. So he was a change of direction speed. So he was able to go out there, make people miss. I mean, Justin Jefferson, he's got the top end speed. He's got the change of direction, and he's got the football IQ, right? So he can, let's say, fade to one direction and then cut to the other side, like wait until the defender puts their weight onto the side that's incorrect and then change directions. He knows how to leverage his game. So he's not only, an athletic freak, let's say with Jefferson, he's also a really smart guy. He knows how to play football. He's got the football intelligence through the roof. Zachary says, KJ Hamler is a viable captain. Do I think he is? We'll get to that here in a second. He said, you feel like he's a Tyler Lockett role / mold for Denver. I think he can get there. He's cheap enough to where you take him, you can fit in a lot more of these top end players. There's players that I prefer over him, but I think you might be onto something. He's going to be relatively low owned there. I didn't have him in my captain pool as of right now, but I'm going to consider it. I guess it's a little bit contrarian because I didn't even consider doing it, but you're right? He's that small, shifty sort of wide receiver. It's going to be more possession over the middle, little short stick routes, that sort of thing. That's the Tyler Lockett special. It's also the KJ Hamler special. He's $4,400. If you take him, I mean, you can jam in 4 players up here easily at that point, right? Because your captain's $600. You're going to have $45,000, $44,000 for 4 spots. Yeah. I mean, it's viable. Is it my favorite captain? No, it's not my favorite captain, but I think I might be getting there now, Zachary. You might have talked me onto it there a little bit. We talked about some of these top end guys. I'm going to talk about this lower 7K range / top of the 5 and 6K range here a little bit. Some of the tight ends. First off, Noah Fant. I don't hate it at all because Geno Smith, if he's going to throw, it's going to be short intermediate routes or some of these play action where the tight ends on play action tend to get wide open because they'll go out there, they'll fake like they're run blocking, right? Which as soon as they go out there, they start shuffling their feet like you do as a tight end when you're going to block. They lower your butt a little bit to get into that blocking stance. Those linebackers that are assigned to you, that are there to cover you, completely shift their focus, right? It's, they look at the running back at that point. They're like, okay, it's a run play. Those tight ends, what you're designed to do on those play action plays, which they never show this enough on TV. It's all about the quarterback. It's all about quarterback of play action. It's just as much about the wide receivers and tight ends as it is the quarterback. In truth, it's about getting on the same page that makes it magical. When you go out there and you're shuffling feet, you wait until the defender starts to, make their move towards the running back or shift their focus away from you. And then you break and go out there and make the move. He's going to get to guys like Noah Fant on a lot of those plays over the middle. Guys on Seattle now, I mean, I don't even know who his Tyler Lockett's going to, I mean, he has Tyler Lockett still, so it's probably still going to be Tyler Lockett. But who's that number 3 going to be? That's what I'm trying to figure out here because as of right now, there's a few guys that could fill that sort of role for them. So you have D. Eskridge, who's he's been pretty decent in the preseason. Marcus Goodwin's not going to play, so I'm not really factoring him in. But I am considering D. Eskridge there. There's a few other wide receivers and tight ends that could end up getting a little bit of run there. Whoever ends up being this number 3 wide receiver when they're running these 3 wide receiver sets could get a lot of targets over the middle. But Noah Fant and Tyler Lockett for sure are going to be in that role. So I do like getting to Fant. We talked about Lockett a little bit before. Albert O, I have a sneaking suspicion is going to be higher owned than I expect. So I have him at 23.6% ownership right now. 3.1% at the captain slot. And based on what I've seen across Twitter, YouTube, a lot of the other cappers around the industry, particularly the ones that have a large following out there, a lot of people like Albert O, and I get it, right? Russell Wilson loves his tight ends. He gives them plenty of production in the red zone specifically, which for Showdown, scoring touchdowns is the name of the game to get to the optimal lineup. He's $5,000. I mean, you could even use him at the captain slot. I'm definitely going to be playing him. He'll be in my player pool. I'm just not so sure that he's all that. I don't know. I'm not sure if he's worth all the hype. He's a potential piece of chalk that could really fade because, again, 26.3%, I think it could be 30%, 35%. So I'm playing him, but I'm treading with caution. Just understand that. So I might play something like 40%, just stick to it. And if he ends up being 30, 35%, so be it. I don't want to play him in half my lineups. I just have a weird feeling about Albert O. His floor is legitimately 3 or 4 fantasy points. Whereas, I know it's $2,000 more expensive. Tyler Lockett has a 10-point fantasy floor, 8 maybe at the very worst out there. Albert O could put up a 2 or 3 point performance and just absolutely wreck your lineup. So keep that in mind with Albert O, particularly if he's super high owned. Might be somebody to consider fading in a single entry or 2 to 3 max sort of format. The defenses are in play. They're never my favorite though, because to end up in the optimal, you do have to get 5, 6 sacks. You got to get a few turnovers, maybe a defensive touchdown, so that sort of thing to spur yourself on. But it should be a relatively low scoring affair. I think I'd be betting the under, if anything, if I was betting the spread there. So both the Broncos at 4,800, Seahawks at 3,200, at least in my opinion, are both in play. But I like the kickers a little bit more. So I touched on it earlier, but I'll touch on it again. I expect these offenses, just like many in week 1, to be a little bit rusty, to maybe spurred out a little bit when they get into the red zone. So guys like 4,200 McManus, 4,000 for Myers, I think are well within play too. Walker's probably out, but he's still a game time decision as of right now. So we'll have to see about that. Travis Homer should be getting running back 3 touches. or running back 2. Honestly, we don't really know. It's either going to be obviously Penny's number 1, and then number 2 is either going to be Homer or Dallas, one of the 2 combinations. And either way, I think $400 Dallas you have to have an eye on, but even $1,400 Travis Homer is still going to get a few touches and can make a big gain with one of them. So who knows there? Eskridge, we talked about, maybe he plays some wide receiver 3 for Seattle, but that's a role that's really up in the air at this point. Eric Tomlinson, same thing with Eric Saubert. They might see a few snaps for Denver. It's kind of unclear who'd be playing there in the red zone for them between Tomlinson and Saubert, so we'll have to see. Jalen Virgil, Washington, Parkinson, Beck, and Hart. These sort of players, I'm not even sure are going to see the field. Penny Hart's the one that I'd bet my money on the most to end up seeing the field just because he's a wide receiver. Somebody like D. Eskridge up here at $1,000, and maybe he plays that wide receiver role for a few snaps, wide receiver 3 role for a few snaps. It's within his range of outcomes to go out there, get like a 20, 30-yard catch, and at $200, like 4 or 5 fantasy points, might end up cracking the optimal lineup. So it is something to consider. But a lot of these pivots down low, I'm sticking to Dallas. I like him quite a bit. Tomlinson's going to see the field. I think he might be worth a few shots on. But outside of those few players down there, it's slim pickings, right? So that's why somebody like Russell Wilson, I don't think is nearly as viable, because first off, he's like nearly 12 grand at flex, and that's enough right there. You put him at captain, it's nearly 18 grand. I mean, it's asking a lot for somebody like him to end up in the optimal lineup. So just by being a little bit more balanced, I know somebody before mentioned KJ Hamler at captain. I'm not against it. I think it's a pretty decent idea. You can go out there and be a little bit more realistic with the rest of your spots, right? It's still live in this like 7-8K range. Maybe your one cheapie is going to be one of these kickers over here, right? Rather than, trying to take a chance on a Penny Hart, for example, at $200. We'll go ahead and catch up on chat. And then afterwards, we're going to go and do a little bit of lineup building, that sort of thing. So let's see what's going on. David says, what about Noah Fant? Guy is a veteran. You said, yeah, you answered you. Yeah, so I don't love him at captain because I don't think he has that top end upside. But yeah, I think you're onto something. Low owned. It's just as much of a revenge game for him as it is for Russell Wilson. And Wilson's going to be nearly owned in every lineup, right? Whereas Noah Fant, let me see what I have him at. I haven't blacked out, but I'll bring it up on my other screen. 1 second here. Let me stop sharing it. So I can bring up the ownership for you. I can give you a number on one guy, right? I mean, that seems fair enough. Let's see. Noah Fant, I have it 11.4%. So yeah, you're 100% right there. He's going to be much lower owned than he should be. You can put him in 25% of lineups to get leverage. I mean, more than ideally, you can put him in like 35 to 40%. Get a bunch of leverage to the field. Yeah, dude, I'm completely behind it. I just wanted to make sure the ownership number was there, but I figured he was low owned. And yeah, I think he could be a good source of leverage. JG says, saw a stat in a GPP QB captain lineups only win 15% of the time, and 30 to 40% of the field puts them into captain. Yeah, that's why I'm so against it. So I talked about it with my first Thursday night football video where, we had an elite matchup there too, right? It was Matthew Stafford. He had Josh Allen on the other side. I argued that you probably don't want to play him at captain just because, like, if they get to a ceiling performance, right, there's a really good chance that somebody catches 2 touchdowns out of either team, right? Or somebody, like in the example of that game, like Cooper Kupp, just absolutely smashes out there and puts up just way more points than you can imagine at captain, right? That happens a lot more often. And I mean, if you're playing cash or 2-3 maxes, smaller field stuff, I understand playing quarterback at captain. You're baking in points, particularly if you're playing cash contest, right? You're taking such a high floor, you're just locking those in. I think there's something to be said for that. But in large field GPPs, which is what you're talking about there, 100% right. That's for sure. So yeah, no QB captain for you. I agree with you there. I won't be on Russell at captain. I'm probably not playing Geno at captain either, to be frank with you, even though he's super cheap. What's going on? Hopefully you're doing well. Robert says, I agree. The only time I'm playing a QB and captain is when there's rushing upside. I like Lamar. Yeah, and you hit on it there. I like Lamar. I like Hurts at captain. I'm going to like Trey Lance at captain at some point this year. And that's probably it. Yeah, that's probably the list right there. Carmi says, is Dissley worth anything? He is. He definitely is. Where is he on the pricing? Yeah, so he's $800. Yeah, he should see the field. They just have so many tight ends on that team. It's hard to tell. We know the main guy obviously is going to be Noah Fant, but maybe he sees the field, right? It did in the past, right? They had multiple tight ends in the past, and Dissley still saw the field. The issue was that he only hit like 3 or 4 times a year, right? So even though he's super cheap, he only got you more than like 20, 30 yards a few times in the year. He scored like 1 or 2 touchdowns last year. So, his route to getting to the optimal lineup is certainly a rocky one, right? It's not going to happen all that often. But boy, oh boy, when it happens, are you going to have leverage? And you're not going to have to put him in many lineups. So if you're playing a bunch of lineups, let's say like a 50 to 150 sort of lineups, I'm all for it in that sort of build. Nick says, why does everyone say Albert O and never says his name? Because they can't pronunciate it. I honestly, if I try to right now, it's going to sound horrible. I'm going to do it anyways. Albert Okwu Bunum. Like I can't say it. I'm sorry. And I think a lot of other people out there are in the same boat. So that's why they say that. That's the thought process there. Colin says, only playing one lineup. What sort of kind of want to degen? Thoughts on using Geno at captain? So you're only playing one lineup. You're really putting all your eggs in one basket. That's okay. I get it. Right? You're just trying to get some exposure. And I respect it. I understand it. With 4 of his targets and running it back with Russ. So if you're going to run it back with Russ, like you're assuming that this is a shootout, right? So that just know the script that you're playing. What I think is a little bit more realistic is perhaps using Geno at captain, using 1 or 2 pass catchers, probably 2 with him, maybe even a running back like Rashad Penny, because if he's going to be productive, that means that Penny's probably helping him move the sticks. Perhaps he's going to score a touchdown when they get down into the red zone. So I don't hate using a running back with Geno Smith there, but running it back with maybe the pass catchers. So I don't hate it, but maybe the pass catchers are a better idea, Colin, just because I don't know if it's going to be a shootout. But hey, if you're playing that script, Colin, again, we don't know what's going to happen. Crazy shit happens in the NFL. By all means, go ahead and do it. And JG says, I give you props trying to pronounce his name live. Yeah, I tried it. That's the thing. Like, I don't have an ego like that. Like, I understand that like things are hard to say, but that's why people say that. Yeah, 100%. That's why people say Alberto, because they don't know how to say his name. And I honestly would challenge a lot of people out there to say it. Like if you practice it, I'm sure you can say his name, especially if you hear it live. But like even the announcers like don't even say his name. Like, they won't even try. So like they're cowards. If you're getting paid to be an announcer, like come on, man, got to go out there and do your thing. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to hop into making a few lineups live. So let me bring up Draftkings. There we go. And we're going to talk through my thought process, what I'm going to be doing for about the next hour and a half after we finish this stream. Because again, I'm building 55 lineups and they're going to all be by hand. So we're only going to give you 4 people here because I don't want to give you guys full lineups for obvious reasons there. Because again, the thought process we're going through, I'm literally going to be doing it 5 minutes after we get off stream. But it'll give you a good idea on how to get started with making your builds. Alrighty, so we're going to start here with a cash build. It's the easiest. Hopefully you didn't unplug our mic. Looks like we're good because it's the easiest. It's the most straightforward build that you can get to. And when you're dealing with cash at captain, you kind of want to take a middle tier guy because, if you take Russell Wilson at captain, you're dealing with what, $6,000 remaining per slot. It's tough to get all the guys that you want to in cash at that sort of point. So I think a good starting point for cash here, you go to the winning squad, right? The team with the higher implied total, and you try and take the guy that's projected for the highest points per dollar. And honestly, in terms of points per dollar, our highest projected player is KJ Hamler. I don't think he's the worst idea at captain. If you want to be a little bit safer about it, I'd even consider Albert O, to be frank with you there. But let's go ahead and just put somebody, Jerry Judy. Cortland Sutton, right? Those sort of players. Cortland Sutton is probably the guy that a lot of guys will play at captain here. You could even play Russell Wilson if you wanted to, super expensive. But let's go ahead and start with Cortland Sutton. So that leaves us at 7,100, which again is a lot more doable to fit in the guys that we want now. Cortland Sutton's a great play. You definitely got to have Russell Wilson. I think that's almost a for sure. Geno Smith is almost a shoe-in for sure in cash as well. We still have $5,100 remaining. We're going to have to take some sort of really cheap pick. And because DJ Dallas, if we look at his game log from last year, it's not the most consistent. But, in games where he was getting run, he is getting like 5, 6 points, 10 points, 8 points. He didn't get run. It's like 0.1, right? He gets like 1 carry for 1 yard. If you think he's going to get run tonight, maybe you play him in cash. I don't know if you can do so and feel great about it. So maybe it's not the best cash play, but you can definitely consider it. You can go to Myers. I think McManus would both be decent plays in cash. I've talked about many times before how I love getting to kickers when it comes to cash games. So let's go ahead and put Alberto in there. I talked about him being super chalky. It's another piece of chalk you want to lock in there. So, the pieces of chalk we're taking, right? Son's going to be high owned. Same thing with Wilson and Alberto. Even Geno Smith, he's a quarterback, right? What do I have his ownership at? I'll bring it up here on the other tab. 1 second. It's near 50%. I know it off the top of my head. Let's see. Geno Smith, 43.7% ownership. So you're definitely not getting an ownership discount, but here in cash, that's what we're looking to get to, right? So you have $6,500 remaining. Just for the sake of the DraftKings overlord, we're not going to click in the last player, but I think you could figure out who that would be based on how much money that we have left. What we're going to do now is talk through some GPP strategy, the more interesting part of this. And anytime I build a lineup, I always start with a game script, right? So I'm not just going to start clicking in players, right? That's not how you go about building a GPP lineup when it comes to this. Now in cash, it kind of is, right? You started just clicking in the highest projected players, didn't really worry about correlation whatsoever. That's okay in cash. You don't really have to do that. But over here in our GPP build, it's all about the game script. And what I want to show you here is how we're taking that Seattle build seriously. Let's assume that this is like a 20-17 game. Seattle might lose it. Let's say that they score 17, Denver scores 20. But in that sort of build, what sort of players would I be taking? And like I mentioned, a lot of these Seattle guys are a lot cheaper than they should be, especially these middle tier guys. They're just based on the game total and the, line going into the game. DraftKings priced them lower than the Denver guys. And if we're talking about a 20-point game where it's 20-17, that sort of thing, those sort of guys are more than likely in the optimal lineup. So in this sort of build at captain, I love getting to Penny. This is that sort of build that we got asked about a few times earlier. So I love him in this sort of lineup. Penny at captain. And still like Geno. I still think you could take Russell Wilson, but let's assume that Javonte Williams is just a good pivot off him. I want the decreased ownership, the decreased price as well. And in a lower scoring game, let's assume that there's just not many touchdowns that go around. His rushing production and, his catches out of the backfield are going to mean a lot more. So I'm going to take him there. We have $6,500 remaining. I don't hate the idea of taking a pass catcher to go along with Geno Smith too, right? We want to get some sort of correlation going there. So we're going to take Noah Fant to go along with Geno. We still have $6,600 remaining, which is a pretty solid. I feel good about that. And to pair up with a Javonte Williams, I'm going to go ahead and put Jerry Judy in there. Now that puts us at $5,100 remaining. Now, if you wanted to be a chunk donkey, there's a clear option to put in there now to round out this lineup, right? But when I'm going and putting out a GPP lineup, I'm going to be a little bit more unique about it, right? Let's just say that, right? I'm not going to be taking that chalk donkey that leaves $100 on the table. But that's the thought process for GPP. Again, I'm not going to give you the whole lineup because of the DraftKings overlords and the fact that I'm going to be building lineups here in a little bit too. But that's the type of thought process for a large field GPP. Now, if I'm in a single entry, right? Let's assume I can play a little bit more of a chalky game script. Let's assume that you want to play Russell Wilson in a lineup, right? You want to take the Denver side, right? You want to be a little bit quote unquote safer about it, which I'll just say, guys, for Showdown, for single round things, like we have a hard enough time betting money lines and spreads in football, right? Let alone trying to assume exactly the game script for a game. This chalky game script that I'm about to talk about here, that's going to be owned like super highly owned at every contest today. Like it has just the same amount of chances like everything else hitting. I'm like, oh, I got my cat here, by the way. Making a guest appearance here in the live stream, I guess. Okay. But let's talk through this game script. So the one that's going to be super chalky is taking like a Judy or a Cortland Sutton at captain. And the one that I think might be super chalky is the Sutton at captain. We talked about him being super popular. Let's go ahead and put Russell Wilson in there as a second wide receiver. So somebody else we're going to match up with Russell Wilson. I mean, I guess put Alberto, right? He's super highly priced. He's also going to be super chalky. I mentioned that this build before, you're going to like corner yourself into like 25% of the field. And I'm not kidding, right? So for our last three spots, if you're playing in a single entry 2 to 3 max, you're going to have to differentiate, right? If you're just going to take all the chalk, I mean, you're going to have a really hard time getting any leverage to the field. You're going to have everything go right. You're going to have to hit the exact game script to go out there and win. Whereas, if we shuffle it up here a little bit for our last three spots, we can still get enough leverage to the field, at least for a 2 to 3 max single entry. Now, a large field GPP, when you're playing against 25 to 30% of the field with these three players, I mean, that's tough. I mean, there's going to be enough guys going against you where, like, even with these last 3 spots, it's hard to differentiate. Like, it could be a couple 100,000 people that you're playing against. But because we're playing in a smaller field contest, right, we're thinking for a 2 to 3 max single entry right here. Let's differentiate real quick. And I think a good way to do this, and honestly, I think that not many people are going to do this, right, would be to play Melvin Gordon, who's the backup running back for Denver, with Russell Wilson. In these stacks, everyone's thinking like, oh, it's got to be Russell Wilson that's going off, right? He's going to pass for all the touchdowns. But what if he throws one to Melvin Gordon? It's that simple. What if he throws him a touchdown and he ends up, getting you 40 to 50 yards elsewhere, a couple catches, right? So you get a 3 to 4 points in that department. It's more than reasonable for him to get into the optimal. And here, obviously, we're not taking Javonte Williams. It'd probably be a little bit expensive to do that. But now we still have $6,000 remaining to take our buybacks. And for buybacks, let's try and make them a little bit out of the box or out of the blue, would say. And I think that DK Metcalf's going to be a little bit overlooked here. We have $3,000 remaining if we're that aggressive up top. And just to make sure that we're unique here, I mean, we could leave a good amount of salary on the table. I'm actually probably going to change DK Metcalf. Let's play around with this a little bit, because if we took DK Metcalf there, it kind of puts us in a little bit of a dead zone. I mean, I'm not going to take the Seattle defense. Only leaving 100 on the table, just it doesn't make that much sense for the game script, right? Because we're taking 4 players in Denver. My cat's really trying to get into the screen here, guys. Sorry. Let's perhaps pivot off that, because Walker's probably not going to play. Homer's not my favorite play, especially leaving $2,000 on the table. So we go down and take Tyler Lockett instead. That puts us at $4,700. And that way, right? I mean, we could take Hamler here, leaving $300, but that's a 5-1 stack. I'm not the biggest fan of that. I'd rather go to a 4-2. Myers is not the worst idea. In this sort of script, we're assuming that Seattle just can't get in the end zone, right? They just happen to settle for field goal after field goal. Denver's getting a lot of it done through the air, perhaps. Melvin Gordon, vultures a touchdown, that sort of thing. In a 2 to 3 max, we're still getting to a lot of chalk. We have the leverage there with Melvin Gordon, right? If he scores, he does remotely anything there, we're going to be vaulting ourselves up the board. And it's be taking away from other pieces of chalk like Williams that a lot of people would be getting to there. Lockett's medium owned. He's kind of just like a meh player. He's not helping us or hurting us from the game theory perspective. And then Jason Myers, like he's going to be relatively low owned. Let's see. What do I have his ownership at again? I'll bring it up here on the other side. It's not that much, I know that, but I'll give you a number. It's 13.8%. So, play someone 30% of your lineups, or you play him here in your single entry 2 to 3 max, alongside a Melvin Gordon there. And I think you've done a pretty good self to differentiate. So it all depends on what contest you're in. If you're in, let's see, this is a 200,000 entry GPP, you have to think even more about ownership, right? So let's say that you're even thinking about it beforehand, right? You're trying to differentiate a little bit. Let's just plug in like a little pseudo lineup here, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Okay, so this sort of lineup right here, where you don't have a super chalky captain, Williams is lower owned than Wilson, that's for sure. You do have Geno Smith, who's going to be relatively high owned, but Jason Myers here, you're going to have to really differentiate yourself in this 200,000 entry GPP. Like, you think that, like, okay, we're not taking all the mega chalk. We can probably just go here and take Alberto and get away with it, leaving $500 on the table. I can guarantee you that set of 6 players is duped in the large field GPP. So if you're in this 200,000 entry GPP, just know that like leaving 500 on the table and taking this isn't going to be enough to be unique, because the only reason you're leaving 500 on the table because there's not somebody up there like $5,900 or $5,800. There's a dead zone here, right? There's $1,000 dead zone. So if you really want to get unique here, right, it's get to Hamler, right? Go down to the $4,400, leave $1,100 on the table. It all depends on the contest you're in, right? So if you're in like a 5,000 entry GPP, which is what I'm in tonight, I'm in a smaller GPP, not, what is this, literally 200,000 other entries that you're playing against. You have to play a completely different game. Like, I'd be okay playing Alberto in my contest. I'd be more than fine with leaving $500 on the table. I think that's probably going to be unique in my 5,000 entry contest. There's no way in hell it is in the Largeville GPP. So just understand that it all changes from contest to contest. We'll finish up on chat. He says Geno is not that solid. I don't know if I said that like he's ever that solid. I saw a question out of the corner of my eye. Yeah, I don't know if I ever said like he's that solid, bro. I mean, he's just like a decent play. He's a quarterback over here in a Largeville GPP and Showdown. He's $8,600. I mean, what do I project him for? Just to give you an idea. I mean, like, I know he's not that solid, but in terms of points per dollar, he's one of the best plays on the slate, right? Because he's 8,600. I project him for 14.2 points, but 1.6x points per dollar is in the top 10 on the slate of anybody above $6,000. Like it's of anybody above $4,000, it's in the top 5 to 10 there. He's still a decent play. It's not like I think he's that nice, right? But he's a quarterback at $8,600. Like you'd be remiss not to play him. Most quarterbacks are 10 grand, right? So if you're playing cash, I don't think he's a bad play. So I don't know what Geno Smith did to hurt you, Elmore, but hey man, you seem like a hater. That's all I know. You seem like a little bit of a hater. Big Test says, good luck tonight. Hopefully you ship these GPPs. Agree. Captain Broncos defense. That's definitely going to be unique, but I don't think it's the best play, to be honest. Hamler is active. Okay, you'll love to see it. Walker inactive. Okay, as expected. Love it. This person is trying to promote their channel, so we're just going to block them. That's funny. Super Clean in there says, okay. Yeah, and the cat is really trying to make an appearance back there. Like she's really stealing the show at this point, but I think she's trying to tell me that she's hungry or something. And Robert says, it's a good sign for Geno, for who you're talking about. Let's find out tonight. Yeah, I agree. It's a good sign. It's a good sign for Geno if the slapdicks are like, oh, Geno's not that nice, right? I think he's going to be 50% owned. Like, I think people are going to give him respect. I have him like 43.7% owned. Maybe he won't be. Maybe he'll be like 30% if everybody out there is going to have that sort of opinion about him. Like, I thought people were going to give him respect because, I mean, look at his game log from last year. It's not that bad. 22 points in one of his starts, right? You know, he had 11, 11, and 10, sure. Like he's had bad games, but he's capable of putting up 22 points. Against Pittsburgh, I know he didn't have the best day, but that offense played well. He only scored 11 fantasy points, but I know he had multiple running backs and receivers that scored more than 15 against us. Like sometimes it's not all about Geno, right? It's about who the other players around him can do, what they can do around him. Adam says, your favorite captain? So good question. My favorite captain is probably Rashad Penny. So at captain, what's he cost? Like $11,700. I don't mind Tyler Lockett at $10,500. From the Broncos side, Jerry Judy is like the one wide receiver I think is going to be a little bit underutilized at captain. I think that Son's going to get a lot of attention. I think the Hamler is probably even going to get quite a lot of attention there too. But Jerry Judy, if you're looking to get leverage on anybody, might be the guy that's a little bit overlooked. So that's what I'd say. Super Clean says, yeah, possible sleeper. Definitely agree with you. But yeah, that's all I've got, boys. I'm going to go ahead and sign off at this point. Best of luck with all of your builds. Got to hop into making this 55 lineups by hand. Sorry, a bunch of them out there. It's going to take me some time. But like I said, hopefully one of us can ship the GPP tonight. Let's go ahead and next live stream will be for the Thursday night stream. So that's going to be Thursday, I believe, at 5 p.m. So an hour earlier than what we did here for Monday night. And sometime on Tuesday, there's also going to be a preview dropping. So I'll be going through the game scripts, the totals, a few of the players to keep an eye on from an injury perspective for the week. So there'll be both a preview and a live stream for Thursday Night Football. Sunday night is going to be all on the Patreon. So for that, you're going to have to be on the Patreon for. I'll be posting my projections there, doing some of the times I'll be doing a Discord stream there. Some of the time it'll just be a live chat in the voice channel. But that'll all be on Patreon. And then Monday night streams are always going to be these live streams. So they're going to be either 5 or 6 p.m. every single night before the Monday night game. We'll talk about the injuries and everything that we did here, right? It's pretty self-explanatory if you got to this point. And then all the projections are on Patreon there too. So that's all we've got, boys. Best of luck, and I'll catch you guys next time.